When you think of the movie The Sixth Sense, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
I see death.
The deep yet troubled relationship between Cole and his mother, right? Well, if you don't think of that, then you should. Whether you've seen the movie or not, if you have lived a life and have heard of movies at all, you probably know a few things about The Sixth Sense. The relationship between Cole and his mother isn't actually one of the things that people talk about this movie. However, I do think it's one of the key things that makes this movie so rich and so great. So I watched The Babadook for the first time recently. I noticed a super specific commonality between The Babadook and The Sixth Sense. That commonality is a creepy kid with a single mom. It's a super specific trope, but is present in a lot of really great horror movies. And that made me wonder, why? What does this trope do for horror movies, and why is it so good? Obviously, the creepy kid is a super popular trope in horror movies. It's been done a bunch of different ways, many different times. But I think something special happens when you pair this creepy kid with a single mom. In this video, I'm going to focus on 4 of my favorites, and in each of these movies, I think this trope really adds to the story in a great way. I'm going to focus on The Sixth Sense, The Babadook, The Others, and The Ring. Side note about The Ring, if you didn't know, the original was actually made in Japan. It's a really great movie. Critics actually rated it a bit higher than the American remake of The Ring. But for this, I'm going to primarily use examples from the American version of The Ring, largely because it just focuses more heavily on the parent-child storyline, so I think it's a little more relevant here. Because the creepy kid trope is so common, there are a ton of different ways that it can be manifested. And in these movies, these kids are varying degrees of creepy. They're not always the wide-eyed kid who says weird stuff about the paranormal. Sometimes they're more socially weird, maybe they're more isolated, but all of the kids in these movies are somehow different from other kids and a bit isolated or socially vulnerable. Critics also have rated all of these movies pretty highly. Obviously, Rotten Tomatoes isn't the end-all be-all for critic reviews. I think it shows that these have some merit to them. Also, I think they're amazing, and it's my video, so I get to include them. Because I really think that these movies are worth a watch, I'm not going to spoil any big endings or any big twists in any of these movies. Even The Sixth Sense, if there is even a single soul left in the world who doesn't know the twist of The Sixth Sense, I can't have it on my conscience that I ruined it for them. So let's actually talk about how this trope takes shape in each of these movies. In The Babadook, Amelia is a single mom to her son, Samuel, and Samuel is annoying. I think the actor did an absolutely great job playing the most annoying kid. I don't think it was unintentional that he's annoying. I think it was very intentional. The editing, the acting, everything about it was beautifully done and executed. And it made for a really believable storyline where this single mom who's trying to keep everything together has just this annoying kid who can't make friends. He can't do well in school. He can't be normal. There's that meme, I don't know if you've seen it, but where she just loses her mind for a second and yells at the kid, "Why can't you just be normal?" And he just screams back at her. This creates a really intense, stressful environment for both the mom and the kid, because the kid can't make friends, he just can't get it right, it's not his fault. And the mom can't keep a handle on him. She can hardly hold down a job because he can't even stay in school, he's getting expelled. Problems crop up left to right in this environment. And this all gets made exponentially worse when they're introduced to a monster, the Babadook, and it begins to haunt them in their home. But once this monster starts to haunt them, their support kind of ends up dropping like flies, things just get worse for them, and it's this perfect psychological storm. And it leaves you, the audience, as well as the characters, wondering what's real and what isn't. It's an amazing watch, really beautifully done, great performances. If I haven't said it enough, you should definitely watch it. The Ring is that movie where the girl crawls out of the well and it's super creepy. But there's way more to it than that. It's a story about a journalist named Rachel who's a single mom to a kid, Aiden. You can tell that she has a hard time juggling work and caring for him. Aiden also is having trouble in school. He's definitely got that creepy kid vibe. Rachel's niece dies after watching a videotape that tells her she's going to die in 7 days. Rachel investigates the videotape, and along the way, Rachel ends up watching it and gets told that she's going to die in 7 days. And then her kid Aiden watches it, and now Aiden is also on the hook for dying within 7 days. So the stakes are super high. It puts an incredible level of responsibility on the mom to protect her only child from a death that I think she probably feels guilt about, because he watched the movie that she took home. He got into her stuff and he found it and he watched it. Also, having a 7-day timer is a natural creator of urgency. It's a super creepy kind of ethereal watch, and also a super classic pop culture hit. The Others is my favorite movie ever in the world. It's a great movie that takes place right after World War II in England. It's about a woman named Grace who has 2 kids who are allergic to light, which is a real disease. If they're exposed to light, they will go into anaphylactic shock and could die. Her husband went off to war and never returned. She lives in like a mansion with a ton of land, and the movie kicks off when 3 members of help staff come on to support the daily to-dos of the manor. So this allergy to light causes Grace to live a really isolated life. I mean, all of them do. The only people they can really interact with are each other. They live on this isolated island. There's constantly fog that kind of obscures their vision to the outside world. Since it's super recently post-war, the mail is unreliable. The priest used to come by and sometimes doesn't. Isolation is a huge factor here. And the movie itself is really dark and dreary because they literally have to live in the dark all the time. This makes everything even more scary when they start to suspect that there are intruders or entities that are coming into the house and they can't figure out who they are or what they're doing. The relationship between Grace and her 2 kids is clearly very loving. But there's also this element of resentment because they force her to live this life. She's lonely and she's isolated and she has to live in complete darkness. She can never leave the house, and she has these children who will never be able to really grow up and leave the nest. So she's kind of weighed down by these 2 children, despite the fact that she loves them so much. This creates a lot of cognitive dissonance in her and a ton of guilt and sort of resentment and mistrust that comes and goes. So I know technically that this is 2 kids with a single mom. However, these kids were actually originally written to be twins. And it was probably just easier to cast 2 actors that were slightly different ages, or they didn't want to deal with the CGI of doing twins. I don't know. I think functionally these 2 kids kind of act as one single entity when it comes to their relationship with their mom. While the kids play off each other, their relationship with their mom goes through the same general strokes. Amazing watch, really, really beautifully done. Great performances, just amazing all around. I love it. You should watch it. The Sixth Sense, as most people know, is about a child psychologist named Malcolm who wants to help this little boy Cole who says that he can see dead people. Malcolm had another patient like this in the past and he wasn't able to help him, and now he wants to help Cole so that he can make up for not being able to help that other patient. The movie largely focuses on the relationship between Cole and Malcolm. But the relationship between Cole and his mom is a rich one. His mom, Lynn, is a single mom. She works 2 jobs, and she's trying to keep things together, make ends meet, and make sure that her kid is happy. They have a really close relationship, as many single moms with kids do. So when Cole starts exhibiting behavior of mental illness and kind of doing creepy kid things, it kind of freaks her out and creates distance between the 2 of them. So this furthers the isolation that Cole feels to know that his own mother doesn't believe him and actually feels uncomfortable around him. It causes Cole to not talk to his mom, which creates even more distance and ends up worsening his experiences with seeing dead people. So what is it about this trope? Why does this show up so much, and why is it so good? So I think there are 6 key reasons that this trope is such a strong one in horror movies. Number 1, the creepy kid thing works. The creepy kid is a very well-known trope in horror, it's nothing new, and it's common for a few reasons. Narratively, the creepy kid is a great canvas for bridging the gap between the monster's world and reality. In many cases, the kid's weirdness and their openness to things that more normal people might be closed off to allows them to reach into the beyond and contact these monsters or these spirits or whoever it is that nobody else can see. Having a weird kid also creates ambiguity, which is great for a horror movie. Is something spooky going on, or is the kid just being weird again? It makes you as the audience wonder, and it makes the characters in the movie wonder. This doubt creates frustration and isolation in the character, and for the audience, it builds tension. Finally, there's something especially unsettling about corrupted innocence. Haunted kids subvert expectations and give the same ick factor as a haunted doll or a kitten with rabies or something that should be cute and friendly but is just off. Number 2, this trope makes the stakes super high. In media, parent-child relationships are often depicted as the strongest bonds out there. The weird kid with the single mom trope takes this love as far as it can go by giving the mother only one child and removing any other bonds in her life. Similarly, because the kid is creepy or weird, it's probably hard for them to make friends, and so they too really only have their mom. This creates a frighteningly strong combination of love, a desire to protect, and a fear of losing the other person. In the Babadook, Samuel just cannot stop playing with weapons because he's obsessed with protecting him and his mom against the Babadook. This often breeds guilt when the mother or the child isn't able to provide everything that the other person needs. In the Babadook, Amelia just can't get her kid to be normal enough to make friends. Being in a position where you only have one other person in the entire world really narrows your world and pressurizes it. It puts a ton of responsibility on each character, and that intense fear of loss and guilt that sometimes comes along with it is great fodder for horror, especially emotionally rich and character-driven horror. Number 3, it creates isolation, loneliness, and cabin fever. This close and solitary bond between a mom and her only child makes for a really lonely life. Only having one other person in the world is isolating. It can lead to rash decision-making, cabin fever, insanity. The list goes on. In many of these movies, The movie makes a point to show that the mother is lonely. Often, the mom will have a passive love interest, and usually nothing really comes of it because they have too much on their plate to make something like that happen, which is a really sad thing, but a very telling storyline to include. For example, in the Babadook, Amelia has some banter with a really nice coworker at work, and he even covers for her and lets her go home early for a day because she says that her son is sick. Actually, her son was expelled for bad behavior, and the love interest ends up figuring this out and kind of judging her for it. There are also some really artfully done scenes in the Babadook where Amelia is watching late night TV and a romantic storyline will come on, and you can see longing in her because she misses that type of connection. They really don't overdo it, but it's very clear that she is lonely and misses companionship. There's a really beautiful scene in The Others where they're sitting around the fire. Grace starts just asking the servant about her life. It feels out of character for her, and then you realize that Grace is just immensely lonely. She probably hasn't chatted with another adult in years. They don't have electricity, they don't have phones to call anybody. The only companions that she has in her life are 2 children who are allergic to light, so they don't know anything about normalcy or the outside world. And being both a single mom and a weird kid can create social vulnerability. The single moms in these stories often receive judgment for their parenting, and whether justified or not, the mom will be desperately trying to make ends meet, and a neighbor or a friend will be worrying about the child's welfare. In The Sixth Sense, after Cole gets bullied and locked in the closet with a ghost that leaves marks on him, so they take him to the doctor, and the doctor implies that the marks on Cole are probably from the mother. So the mother receives judgment in this whole thing where all she's trying to do is help him. In The Ring, Rachel gets judgment from teachers for not talking to Aiden enough about the death of his cousin. Judgment of single mothers and the way that they parent their children, I think, is nothing new and not exclusive to horror movies at all. It creates more isolation and it ramps up the guilt that the mom may already be feeling. Meanwhile, the weird kid has his own problems with social vulnerability. Being a creepy kid sucks. There's a lot of variation in how the creepy kid or weird kid actually gets played out depending on the movie, but almost always it makes it hard for them to make friends, so this often pushes them closer to the monster and just creates more isolation that sometimes creates guilt in the parent for not being able to help the kid live a happy life. Sometimes these kids end up getting bullied. There's a heartbreaking scene in The Sixth Sense where Cole pretends that he's friends with his bully so that his mom doesn't have to worry about it. In the Babadook, Samuel's only friend stops wanting to hang out with him and no longer wants to have a birthday party with him. In The Others, the family is naturally isolated by being on this island, by the fog that surrounds it, and by being post-war so that mail isn't really coming, people aren't really coming around. It's just not an environment where neighbors are stopping by. When you pair this with the darkness that the characters have to live in, it kind of starts to breed resentment and claustrophobia and just cabin fever and this craziness. They can't leave each other and they can't leave their physical house. So this judgment and this isolation comes from a bunch of different places, but ultimately it creates this enclosed, isolated environment that can give people cabin fever or create resentment against each other because they can't leave. 4, it puts a ton of pressure on the characters. Single moms face so much pressure in general. The burden of keeping their child alive and well and happy is no easy task, and it falls squarely on their shoulders and their shoulders alone. Often, the mom's own well-being takes a backseat to the kids. A lot of times, the single moms in these movies will be working multiple jobs, and they'll be struggling to make ends meet. There's also added pressure to the kids in these situations. A lot of times, these kids are mature beyond their years because they're often the only person their mom has to talk to, so they're likely having way more mature conversations than their peers around bills and how work is going, and just things that make them wise beyond their years. For example, there's a scene in The Ring where Rachel comes back from work and they're off to a funeral, and Aiden has already laid out her clothing that she planned on wearing and is tying his tie for the funeral. So it's kind of like Aiden has filled some of the roles that a father figure would have. Also, being the only parent to a child makes the parent's job immensely difficult and immensely important. That's so much responsibility to put on one person. So for example, in The Ring, Rachel is trying desperately to solve the mystery of her niece's death, not just for her sister whose daughter died, but because if she doesn't do this, her son will die. Number 5, it creates ambiguity. Ambiguity is huge for creating a horror movie, especially when it's a psychological one. The single mom, weird kid bond is a pressure cooker of a relationship with little to no outside witnesses. So it's easy as the audience to start to wonder if what's happening is actually happening or if one or both of these characters are cracked. Similarly, it's really easy for this doubt to spread in other characters in the movie, because this bond from the outside can easily look like 2 weirdos getting weirder. Sometimes it inspires people to think that these characters need professional help. For example, in the Babadook, as the hauntings get worse and things kind of unravel for Amelia and Samuel, Their next door neighbor starts to really worry about them and check in on them, and Child Protective Services comes and see the house kind of devolving. It's a great canvas to get the audience and other characters wondering what's real and what's not, which makes for a beautiful psychological thriller. Number 6, it creates really rich emotional characters. Character-driven horror movies can be some of the richest stories out there. I kind of believe this across genres. I'm a huge fan of character-driven plot lines. It sounds like it goes without saying, but a lot of horror movies are more centered around the jump scares and creepy atmospheres or gore, which are all great. Those are all great types of horror movies. I love a good slasher film. I love a good kitschy B-movie horror, but movies that focus on the character arcs and emotionally driven storylines just make for really rich horror because they draw on some of the deepest human feelings. The bond between a single mom and her kid, especially if the kid is weird, is really emotionally intense. And it plays on some of the strongest human emotions out there: love, fear, and guilt. This allows these stories to move beyond the traditional monster movie or traditional jump scare and hit you at a deeper level. It makes these movies highly relatable, which makes them extra scary. We all know how it feels to love intensely or to fear losing somebody, to feel guilty for not being supportive enough to somebody. Those are really scary, dark thoughts that a lot of us can relate to. And that makes for a beautiful movie when those emotions and ideas are drawn on correctly to create horror. This was honestly such a random topic for a video. I just was watching the Babadook for the first time and realized that the single mom and weird kid trope was in so many of my favorite horror movies. And when I was looking it up, nobody was talking about it. At least nothing I could find had talked about it yet. So I wanted to dive into it and figure out why this was happening, what makes this trope so common, and why are the movies that feature this trope so good. Of course, probably not all of the movies that have this trope are good, but a lot of them are. I had a ton of fun diving into this topic and creating this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm not an expert, I just love talking about movies. So if you like videos like this, please like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more.